Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session in the International Water Colloquium organized by UNU-FLORES, TU Dresden, and the University of Bonn. I am Arid, and alongside Christina, will be moderating this session. If you would like to know more about the next week's session, the last session, you can see the details on our webpage, which will be shared on the chat. Today, the topic, water scarcity situation in Chile. Opportunity for water reuse to reduce the water gap will be discussed. At first, the panelists will give a presentation about the topic, and then a dialogue will be initiated, and afterwards, your questions will be addressed by the panelists. For that, I would kindly ask you to post your content-related questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of the Zoom window, and we will forward it to our panelists. And yeah, I am happy to welcome our panelists for today. Andrea Muller, PhD researcher at UNU-FLORES and TU Dresden. Hello. And Ulrike Broschek, Deputy Manager of Sustainability at Fundación Chile. Welcome both. I think Andrea will start, so the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Rajit and Christina, for moderating this session. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening from wherever you're listening to this session. Hello, Ulrike. So today I'm just going to briefly introduce the modality of our session. Ulrike will be presenting first the vision of the project Water Scenarios 2030, highlighting contextual aspects of the situation in Chile, and then also the management strategies of the project and some examples of the application of water reuse. And then I will present an overview of the development of a decision support framework and also the preliminary results of the case study that we're collaborating in. So now, Christina, Ulrike, you can share your screen, I think.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Thank you for the presentation and the invitation to this webinar. So I'm going to share the, is it okay?
Yes.
Yes, it's clear.
Okay, thank you. So as Andrea mentioned, I'm going to show you a bit about the Water Scenarios initiative that we are carrying out in Fundación Chile. This is a multi-sector initiative, which is looking for accelerate the implementation of solutions to achieve water security in Chile. And I'm going to show you also a case study of a solution, which is a very important and interesting opportunity for Chile, which is the reuse of treated wastewater. So when we come into the figures and to the analysis that we have been doing in the Water Scenarios Initiative, the first figure you can see here on the map of Chile, a country that is very long and narrow, as you can see. Here it's divided in two parts. You see the whole north part, the center, and the south part. This is the water gap. The water gap relates the relationship between water consumption, which in this case would be the direct water footprint of the different sectors that consume water, and the relation with the water available, the natural supply of water that is available. When we do this relation through the methodology that was developed by Rivera, you can see the water gap that we have. So you can see that the green, yellow, and red basins already have exceeded the maximum consumption. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry for that. So, as you can see, okay. As you can see, these are catchments that already have exceeded the consumption that is for natural available. So this would be something to look at, and that is a bit an alert of the current situation, where the natural available water, you have the consumption, and that it shows that there is some press through the natural availability of water. When we look at the groundwaters and the trend of the wells, you can see that the analysis that we made with Casalac, which is a center of water in Chile and UNESCO, here you can see the wells, the level of the wells and the historical trend from 1960 to until now. And what this shows is that the levels are going down, and 72% of the total amount of wells have a negative trend, which is statistically important. So this is quite coherent with the figure that I showed before of the water gap. Chile is a country which is quite in a critical situation in terms of climate change. So what we can see is that Chile is the only Latin American country that is going to have extremely high water stress because of climate change. This is according to the analysis that the World Resource Institute had done in 2015. Here you can see on the map the trend in terms of precipitation. And you can see that almost all the country has been affected by lower precipitation in the last years. And also you can see the evapotranspiration that has gone also increasing because of higher temperatures. And this is also almost in all along the country. And actually the south part that historically has had a lot of water is now under also water stress. And accordingly to the last water balance that has been made, we see that the temperatures will rise between 1 and 2.5 degrees. And in terms of the reduction of precipitation, it can even go down until 50%. So this leaves us in a very complex situation. And what is really interesting is that in the analysis that we have done in the Water Scenarios Initiative, is that we can see that when we analyze the problems and the current causes of those problems, 44% of the causes of the problems has to do more with the water management and the governance of water that we have. And only at 12% is the decrease in availability of water due to climate change. So this is a really interesting figure in terms of looking at, is this caused by the water stress we are living, is it caused by climate change or is it caused by management? And what we can see is that the higher amount of the problem has to do with the way we manage and govern water. So this is very interesting, and what we can see here is that there is a big opportunity to better and enhance the way we manage water in Chile in a context of climate change. So the actual scenario is that the trend is that we are going to a negative future, and we need to move to a sustainable scenario, making important change. So we have proposed a water transition between all of the sectors. And here you can see what it consists of. There are 4 main axes. In the center, we have the water governance, a better water governance. It's important to mention that Chile doesn't have one institution that leads the water management in the country, but we have actually 10 ministries that are involved, And according to the World Bank in 2013, there is 43 public departments of state that deals with the water management. So there is a very big dispersion of the institutionality and the water management. And we don't have integral water resource management at the catchment levels. So this is the first part we have to deal with. A second part has to do with the conservation and the protection of the water ecosystems through nature-based solution in terms of sustaining the ecosystems that we have, the natural infrastructure in order to deal with the effects of the climate change. As a third axis, we have the water efficiency. And here you can see that in Chile, there is below even 50% the average of the efficiency of the water use. And then 88% of the water consumption is in agriculture. And there the lack of efficiency is quite high. So there's a big opportunity in working not only in optimize the use of water, but also reduce the amount and the requirements of water that the crops needs, for instance, in the agriculture and farming business. And as a fourth axis, we have the migration of an integration of new water sources. As an example here, we have the reuse of wastewater. So if we look at the figure now, how this is, we can see that we have this dispersion of the public organism with the 43 departments of state. We have a very big focus put on the migration to new water sources. Here it's important to mention that the Public Works Ministry is working a lot in gray solutions, as we call them, which is the water pumps, the water desalination. However, efficiency, as you see, is very low in terms of policies in water efficiency. And what has to do with water conservation and ecosystemic conservation is really out of the question, as it's not within the figure of the different water policies. So what we look for is the fourth axis acting in parallel in a balance. And according to this proposal that was made in terms of how deal with the water strategy in Chile, we developed a portfolio with different solutions, over 200 solutions that we identified worldwide in order to implement this fourth axis. And this portfolio is available in the website, and I'm going to provide you the website in the last slide, so you can also look at this portfolio with many, many options to address water gap and water risk in this fourth axis. And when we look at the new water sources, the reuse of treated wastewater is really an opportunity in terms of making more efficient the use of water. The benefits are many, like providing a new water source in water scarce region and country, as I mentioned before. Also, the reduction of the environmental impact caused by the discharge of this wastewater, for instance, to the sea or to rivers. We can enable a productive development by the use of this water. And also, this water is a safe water source because while we have human consumption, we will always be producing sewage water. So this is a really important water source that is very secure without the vulnerabilities or changes because of the water scarcity or the effects of the climate change. So this is very important also as a benefit, for instance, for farmers. If we look at the picture abroad, we can see that many countries have already start working with water reuse in a very successfully way. So here is a really important solution for Chile. If we look at the picture, what happens now with the sewage water, we can see that we have 32 submarine pipes that discharge sewage water to the sea in almost all the coastal cities. The amount of water that is discharged, you can see here, it's 8 cubic meters per second. And this is very high because it represents the 20% of the total sewage water that is produced in the country. And if we treated this water and reused it, it could lower the water gap by a 10%, which is quite a lot. The water reuse is something that is happening, okay, but it's very slow, and it has only been happening for the mining companies. However, in Antofagasta and Copiapó, cities where the reuse of water has been applied as a project, they have been stopped by other communities or other sectors because of the ownership of the water rights. So this is something very new, but it has been difficult to replicate this kind of solution. So we have start developing a new approach. So we have an approach for the urban part, where we seek for multi-purpose solution, where more than one sector is benefit by the reuse of this wastewater. And then where we look at specifically the coastal submarine pipes, because they discharge water to sea. So in this case, you don't have the problem with the ownership of the water rights because they are thrown to the sea. And in the rural areas like Coquimbo, we have started an approach in rural areas with rural communities. And we have already developed a first case study on this. In terms of urban part, here you can see in the map, the Valparaiso region, which is one of the regions that have the highest rate of water discharge in the country. And here we have seen different pathways for the treated wastewater to farming places. And here you can see the cost analysis, and it's very interesting to see that the costs are 70% lower in comparison, for instance, with desalination. So for farmers, for industries, this could be an important source. All of the results of this analysis are in this publication that you can see that can be downloaded. And I'm going to give you another webpage where all of our publications are, and you can look for them. In terms of the rural part, here you can see a solution that we implemented in Cerrillos de Tamaya. This was a water community which had a sewage treatment plant, and that discharges the water in this yellow spot that you can see without using the water. So here came an agreement between a farmer and the water community to reuse this water by producing alfalfa. The distribution, the interesting thing was that there was a deal here of distributing the profits. So a 40% of the profits from the selling of the alfalfa goes to the water community, and a 60% goes to the farmer. So both of them are benefited by this project. And it has been running now for 4 years, and with many very successful results. And when we look at the region of Coquimbo, we already said that 38% of all of the water communities could replicate this solution in a short term. what we are doing now, and here I'm in the last slides, we achieved to incorporate the water use, the urban water use from the submarine pipes in the water policy of Valparaiso region. We implemented the first formal agricultural reuse system with international standards. It's very important to say that in Chile, we don't have standards for the wastewater reuse. So we had a really important analysis of international standards and applied those. We developed different business models to enable the reuse of water, wastewater in Chile that provides different analysis and alternatives for that. And also we made a legal analysis and a first proposal of how moving forward with the water reuse with the existing regulation and the potential new adjustments of the regulation. I'm very sorry for the problem I had before, but some final thoughts are that the water crisis that Chile is having, both because of a bad management and efficiency of use of water, and also due to the important climate change effect that we are dealing with, shows that slow, continuous, incremental improvement are insufficient. We really need in-deep structural regulation change, a different management model, an institution that can lead water governance in Chile. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I'm going to there it is. The water reuse in Chile is a new alternative source, both for the submarine pipes in the coastal cities and also for the rural communities. And it shows that it enhances the better water efficiency, and it lowers the water gap in almost in this 10% at the country level. It's economically efficient, and the biggest challenge maybe that we have today is to have a water policy that includes and that integrates the wastewater reuse in order to replicate and make this solution much more replicable and transversal in the whole country. So here I leave you our webpage, escenarioshidricos.cl, where you can download all of these publications and the analysis that we have been doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ulrike. Now I will share my screen. I need to here. Go to Zoom. Sorry, now technical issues here and there. I hope you all can see my screen. If there are any issues, well, let me know. After Ulrike gave the context of what we will be addressing later in detail and also in our dialogue, I will present about a more specific topic regarding the decision-making in water scarcity, water reuse situation, and in particularly addressing the risk of water scarcity and the sustainability of water reuse. So as we could see in these situations, I will provide an overview of the conceptual framework and then a rough overview of how we propose that these situations can be analyzed and evaluated, and also some preliminary results of the case study of Cerrillos de Tamaya that Ulrike just presented. So regarding the situations of water scarcity as a problem and then water reuse provided as a solution or a measure that copes with water scarcity, we could see that the management and the decision making is an issue, and it accounts for a big part of what could be attributed to the water gap problem. And in those cases, risk assessment will provide information about, for instance, the level of water scarcity and what to do. And on the other hand, sustainability assessments also provide information about the water reuse measures. And if we want to address the situation completely or as a whole, how can we actually support decision making in these situations? Therefore, we propose to follow 3 steps. First, to understand the water scarcity, water reuse situations, then to understand the concepts that we're going to use or that will guide this assessment, and then to, of course, in order to design a decision support, to understand what the decision-making process is. So to start with the decision-making with the water scarcity, water reuse situation, we propose to start from a rough understanding or a rather generic understanding of what the water flows are. So from a biophysical point of view, from the source all the way through the users, the treatment and the reuse. However, as we just saw and we understood, this is just one part of the problem, because we understand that the actual problem relates to more additional items that are not necessarily referring to water flows, but regarding to immaterial aspects that involve information flows, where, for instance, stakeholders interact, where the institutional and organizational context does play a role in terms of the decision making that then relates to the management alternatives that in the end influence or guide the what is done with the water flows. So once we have understood that this situation is quite broad, we will define, because many aspects have to be brought together, we will define the key concepts that will guide the design of our decision-making support assessment. In that case, we define water scarcity as having not being able to fulfill the freshwater the human demand given the freshwater resources that are available, a generic understanding of water reuse as the use of treated wastewater, then the risk of as a negative probability of negative consequences, giving the exposure to a hazard and a certain level of vulnerability. And finally, the sustainability, which among other aspects strives for a maintenance of economic well-being, the protection of the environment, and an equitable social progress. Once we have understood the 4 concepts that will guide our view on the situation that we just saw from the beginning, in order to actually support decision-making towards the application and towards finding good solutions for these situations, we need to understand also what the decision-making process means. And in this case, we start from a basic understanding that there is an interest or an aim, and then once I am faced to the situation with a particular interest or aim, I need to frame and decompose. I need to frame the situation and decompose it in the pieces that I can understand it, and which then will lead me to evaluate these different aspects according to my interest or aim, whether it's suitable or not suitable to it, and so on, to finally make a choice. And of course, this is then a cyclic process, and it's in constant exchange of information. So what is important here to make the decision is the information. Therefore, we propose that the assessment follows the same logic. So we have an objective, then an analysis phase that helps understanding the situation and framing the situation, and then an evaluation based on indicators as it's normally done, and then to finally provide information for to meet the final choice, which would be, in this case, the level of risk or the level of sustainability. So to present then how our integrated risk and sustainability looks like, we go back to our initial situation of the risk and sustainability related aims. And we follow the same logic of we have an information pool where we included also the different stakeholders that influence the decision-making process. And we have our interest, then we have the analysis, the evaluation phase, and then we finally provide the information for the choice. We here further suggest and propose that the analysis is separated in two tasks. One, probably related more to the framing part that I just mentioned, which is understanding the situation itself and what is involved in it. And the second part, which is already looking towards an evaluation, which is understanding and interpreting the situation in terms of our own aim. In this case, we're not just understanding water flows in general. We want to understand it in terms of risk of water scarcity and sustainability of water reuse. To then perform the evaluation as it's normally done based on indicators and evaluation criteria that follow risk and sustainability perspectives. All of this will be then organized and or guided by the social, economic, and environmental dimensions that are typical from, or the trivial bottom line from the sustainability. So for a rough overview of how we propose that the analysis and evaluation could look like, we propose that the analysis follows a multi-layer approach and a lane-based approach. So basically starting from our biophysical layer, because we're talking about a matter flow, the flow of water, so it's a material resource. And then we relate it to, we need, as we just said, to upload it to the level of decision making, which is at a level of information. So in that case, we propose that we project these understanding of the system, or all these important elements that compose or that are involved in the dynamics of the system, to an information-based level, using the risk and sustainability perspective. So basically, what are risk and sustainability indicators in terms of social aspects, economic aspects, and environmental aspects? And then all of these indicators will guide the decision-making of, well, the decision maker. And then in order to better portray all of this, because this might be something challenging, we propose to follow a lane-based approach that then basically flips these layers that we've created, this virtual information layers, so that we can see the interlinkages not only within the dimensions, but also across them, which also seems to be something that is quite challenging. And for the evaluation, the framework is not restrictive in this regard. We recognize that there are very well established methods to calculate and to evaluate all of the different indicators. However, we do recognize that the multi-criteria decision-making methods are widely used in these cases, particularly when analyzing different alternatives. And also, of course, because of this multi-criteria aspect, we evaluate alternatives given multiple criteria. As I said, there are well-established methods. And here we can see a figure with the most used methods for water scarcity, water reuse situations. So for the case of Cerrillos de Tamaya, which I will show you next, and based on what Ulrike presented, we started to approach this case to test the framework and also to get feedback and in order to improve it. And we started with also processing, and we're analyzing which method could be used to evaluate it. So we're talking about a rural area, as Ulrike mentioned. All of this has been reported in the report of Fundación Chile in 2018. It's a project that was developed already. It has been carried out for some years. And we have the location of our case study in the basin of between the rivers Elqui and Limarí, which is a cold and semi-arid area. And however, as Ulrike mentioned, the reuse of that water is intended to be applied in agriculture. And therefore, we need to understand that the source of water before that application, and even now for some part of the field, is coming from the neighboring reservoir, or neighboring basin, which is in the Recoleta Reservoir. And this is also important because we're transferring water from this basin into another basin. So to explain more or less what what we followed to understand and also to evaluate the situation, we started from a long list of indicators, mainly in this case referring to vulnerability and sustainability. And then we collected the data for these indicators. This was done this year, so due to the corona crisis, we had to do this remotely. Then we selected the indicators based on the data and the thresholds that we had available. We did a weighing of the different indicators as it is suggested for such methods. And then we finally did the calculation of results based on a distance-based method that I will show next. To start with the literature review or the indicators and all the selection of them, we started with the long list of 86 indicators, which we then had to narrow down to 52 because we had 18 with no data and at least 15 with no threshold. We didn't engage in major efforts to find thresholds for indicators that anyway did not have data because we were not going to use them. And then for the weighing method, which is the analytical hierarchy process that we used, it was recommended that all the sets of indicators, so all the social vulnerability indicators, all the economic vulnerability indicators, and so on, are no more than 7 to 10 indicators. I will show you next why this is this way. So we had to narrow down basically from 86 to 34 indicators. But before doing that, I want to show you more or less how it would look like following the analysis, because this study that we carried out is more focused on the evaluation, but I anyway want to show you how the analysis would look like and how it will be improved in next work. So we adapted the system from the source to the reuse. In this case, it's municipal rural wastewater that is treated and then being used in agriculture. Then following the multi-layer approach, we basically flip the system and project all the relevant elements, in this case, boxes, to identify which are the important aspects of in the social, economic, and environmental dimensions. And then we can see here how all the 34 indicators would be distributed according to the social, economic, and environmental dimensions, but also following the source to the reuse phases. And here we can see that, yes, the vulnerability indicators, which are the rather pinkish or orangish color, tend to focus more on the source and use, whereas the sustainability, of course, more into the treatment and reuse. Of course, there were 3 indicators that were both used in vulnerability and sustainability 4 indicators, sorry, assessments. After that parentheses, well, as I mentioned, this is a work in progress, so we're still having to analyze all of this. But I just wanted to show how it looks like for you to understand the idea of the framework. To continue with the evaluation, then the weighting method, we chose the analytical hierarchy process, which is this pairwise comparison where we had this, for instance, the 8 social sustainability indicators being compared among themselves to identify priorities. So which one would weigh more? This was planned to be done in the field work. However, because we could not do it remotely, we thank all the researchers at UNU-FLORES that supported us with the panel discussion and with very insightful thoughts and conclusions that led us to a rather balanced weighting where vulnerability and sustainability weigh the same, and then the social, economic, and environmental dimensions also weigh the same. The same for all of the indicators within each of these dimensions for both sustainability and vulnerability criteria. For the evaluation, we use TOPSIS, which is a rather simple and easy to use distance-based method. We wanted it to be easy to use, easy to program, so that we do not require a specific software or programming skills, so that it's accessible to everyone. We did a modified version which establishes an ideal best and an ideal worst cases. In this case, we we established this both cases in terms of not fulfilling the thresholds for the ideal worst and fulfilling all of the threshold for the ideal best. And then basically our case studies here, and what it does, it's calculating how far we are from each of the cases or how close we are to the ideal best. Since this was also perhaps somehow ideal, we established a minimum desirable case, perhaps something that is not fully ideal or fully complying, but it's anyway something that we can live with, basically. Therefore, I can show you here our results. We can see here in the chart of sustainability versus and vulnerability indices. Both of them are just independent variables that are, and then the score that are portrayed here with their final score. We can see the ideal best and the ideal worst, and then the minimum desirable case. As you can see, the sustainability value of the case study is rather near the minimum desirable case, and it's actually around 80% of the total of what it could achieve. However, the vulnerability still remains far from the desirable case. In case of wanting to improve the understandability of what we want to portray, and also to avoid having to establish this minimum desirable case, we thought that perhaps we can use the zones that have been already recommended for cases referring only to sustainability in the paper of Nunes et al. And establish different areas where we would feel that we can ideas of acceptability or unacceptability to locate ourselves in which area we are. In that case, if these areas were defined as it is, of course, it needs to be defined properly, and this needs further development and discussion. And this would look like something like this. So we would have our case study located here, almost in the acceptable zone. So for the preliminary conclusions, we can say that there is a good level of sustainability of water reuse. It's close to the minimum desirable, and it's around 80% of what it could achieve. However, the vulnerability is still high in terms of how we can be affected by water scarcity. The spatial scale and data availability became evident, especially when we were calculating the level of water scarcity, because of this issue that I showed you, that we were going from one basin to the other one. So when we were calculating it based to the status quo situation, which was bringing all the water from the Limari basin, it showed that there was no water scarcity, when clearly we got the feedback that, or at least the perception of the people, and also especially from the farmers, that there was water scarcity. They could not fulfill their demand. So probably this issue of going from one basin to the other one was something that we could not address because we did not have access to all the data. And then, however, the data and threshold availability issue was somehow buffered by the weighing method that we chose, since we were somehow forced to reduce the number of indicators. And then this led us to the next challenge, which was how do we select the indicators that are relevant? And therefore, we can see that there's further analysis needed to identify the intervention points that are most suitable, as well as what indicators could be used for the evaluation. So finally, my last slide, or second to last slide, would be the requirements of this framework and the challenges. So their key requirements is first to know which elements are characterized by or characterize the water scarcity, water reuse situation. This makes a challenge itself, since the identification is not straightforward. Then we require indicators, and then again, the selection of the indicators becomes a challenge. We need data and thresholds, and as we just mentioned, the data availability is a well-known issue, and also the threshold availability. So we're not only talking about data here. And then we also require an evaluation method, since the framework is not prescriptive in this regard. Then the method selection can even become a multiple decision-making problem itself. And finally, The inter and transdisciplinary approaches that normally are suggested to even overcome some of these challenges become challenging because of the collaboration of different actors, as well as how to perform these approaches appropriately. Therefore, I would like to thank you and especially acknowledge Gerardo and Ulrike from Fundación Chile for providing me the information and allowing me to work on that case study, to Dionisio, because he really spent lots of time with me remotely to provide me more information that needed to understand the full context, to Christy, who worked in the data curation and all the processing for the evaluation, Alessandro, who's working in this widening and seeing and screening all the methods that are available, and to the constant support of Dr. Tamara Vellan and Professor Jochen Schanze for the development of this framework. Thank you very much. Well, the funding agencies, of course, of the National Agency of Research and Development of Chile, and then the support of UNU-FLORES and TU Dresden. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea, and thanks a lot, Ulrike, for this interesting topic you presented. And as promised, we will start now a session of discussion and dialogue before we move to the questions from the audience. We already have some, but yeah, we can start with the dialogue topics. And
yes.
We will highlight certain points. Starting with the relevance of the integral holistic view of the problem and potential solutions to support the design and implementation of these solutions. What would you like to comment on that?
Ulrike, if you want to start.
Okay, thank you. Well, yes, I think this is very important. We started looking at the whole region, the Coquimbo region, which is a northern region, a water scarce region. However, the holistic approach was to see the water scarcity, the wells, the current state of the wells, the water use, and also we made a big identification of the different water communities, the rural water communities, and the way they were doing the wastewater treatment and the performance of that. Once we had the whole picture, we could prioritize different local areas where we could focus the identification of potential water reuse. I think this holistic vision allowed to identify the best projects for the short term. And that made also possible to design with an kind of adaptive way an optimum system. It's very important to implement a system that can operate by time, a long time, because maybe we could implement the wastewater reuse system. However, 1 year after, maybe it would stop and wouldn't operate anymore, which is very common in Latin American countries because of scarcity of resources, capacities, etc. So I think the integral and holistic view have been very important to identify the best opportunities and according to that, select the best options for the wastewater treatment and the reuse of this.
Yes, I would definitely agree, and I'm also glad to hear that that is so in terms of what you're doing practically on the field, basically, because we could also see that also reflected from the scientific literature that is moving towards that. However, it's challenging, and that's why perhaps it's also needed, because as it is challenging, it's difficult to perform and it's not straightforward. And then I'm glad to see that it was helpful for you, especially in identifying the key places. And I would say that in that regard is also something that we can see when it's not done, that some implementations or the implementation of solutions is not sustainable, as Ulrike just mentioned. So it fails rather soon because there were so many other aspects that were not considered. And with an integral view, you aim at reducing that.
Thanks for your discussion about that. And the second point is the relevance of the data availability and information flow between actors to facilitate understanding of the situation. Who would like to start?
You can start, or
Okay, thank you, Andrea. Well, we really started by the information that we had. So we had water information that are very simple indicators, but very robust in terms of data. Of course, we have a very important gap in data, water data in Chile. However, we used the one we had to make a kind of a better approach and a short-term approach. But then we had to go down on field to have interviews with the locals and understand and have better information of the situation and the willing or the willing of doing a project like this, and also stating the current state of the wastewater treatment plants. So we had a report on that, but it was not actualized or current. So we had to go down on field and do one by one interviews to have a better understanding. So those kind of reports could be better in order to be able to have a better understanding and a broader understanding of the opportunities, maybe, I think.
I definitely agree. And I also, when I was starting with the case study as well, and also analyzing the whole situation in Chile, I appreciated that the project of Escenarios Hídricos, who was all starting also to focus and doing this mapping of all the water resources that are available in Chile, or that that they developed a project like this, because I could see that, for instance, in this case where I need to make choices, or I'm trying to develop a framework that says, okay, it's based on information, and then the basic source for that is not there, then it's difficult to actually guide decision making that is well informed. And then what was also difficult in this case study that I could see is that, for instance, carrying it out remotely, it was quite challenging for me to access that data. Therefore, for me, I think it's, in many cases, it would have been a better understanding of the situation that could have even given me better tools to decide which indicators are important to select. So in that case, the data and the information flow from the stakeholders that I could not reach would have facilitated to address this challenge of the indicator selection, for instance.
All right, and moving to the third point, what do you think are the useful strategies for a good cooperation?
Yes, that was I think that was one point that I really wanted to hear, particularly from Ulrike, because I know that in Fundación Chile you've worked in many projects and with a variety of stakeholders and actors, and then what are strategies that have resulted useful for you?
Yeah, I think that as we're talking about a quite innovative solution in Chile, the wastewater reuse, which is something very new, unknown, where there are a lot of ideas or wrong ideas about the security of using wastewater regulations that don't exist about the the wastewater reuse and so far. What we did was a regional water table with the different authorities and also productive sectors. This was very good because we developed the project together with this water table, with having all the authorities around looking and having the different scenarios, the alternatives for them to choose and feel secure about the development of the project itself. So we had, for instance, as an example, we had the Ministry of Health sitting there saying, we can't, I mean, if we're going to do a reuse of wastewater, the first thing we want to know is who is the farmer, because we're going to go there and regulate him and I don't know, even give him, how do you say, Andrea, maybe you can help me there with the English.
Yes.
Multa.
Charge. A charge, yes.
Yeah, charge him for doing this. And so we said, we have a water scarcity. We have seen around the world that there are international standards that enables to do this in a secure way. We need to promote this kind of solution and not go against it. And I think there, within this, the water table, there was a lot of discussion, but the way it was done, it was like a co-construction, a co-development. So after everything, we could take the measures, we could take all the like preventions that was need to have a secure project, a secure first project, to show the benefits and to show that it's secure and safe. So I think that was a very good strategy, because after this happened, and it happened successfully, now even they are willing to replicate and promote this kind of solution. So I think this water local governance is a very key aspect in the development of these kind of new and innovative solutions.
Right. I think I don't have much more to add. So okay. Yes, I don't have much more to add. I mean, from the literature and from the projects that I've also participated in, where there was one where this co-design was also an important part. It seemed a good strategy in terms of also informing everyone, and that everyone feels involved, and it's also informed, rather well reported in the literature. There's also more acceptability about these measures if you involve people. However, also the challenge there is also then when to cut and when to say, okay, until here is the dialogue and now we need to proceed, because sometimes I could see that that was challenging in many cases. And
okay, yeah, building on this point, what about the private and public cooperation? What would you say about this?
Yes, Ulrike, I think you have more experience there than me.
Maybe it's like what I mentioned before. It has been a little bit said. I mean, something to add was that once we had this regional water table, then we came down to the field with the water, with the rural community itself, and had to decide whether they wanted or not the project. So there we also had a kind of a strategy and cooperation in terms of showing scenarios for them and saying, okay, without project, this would happen. With project, this would happen. If it fails, if it's not successful, we wouldn't lose anything, because, for instance, in terms of financing, this is financed by the region, and you only could go back to what you were doing before in the original. So it's not, so showing the different alternatives and being very transparent with the community and showing the project, I think was very important to move forward with the project, and also having the open space to say we don't want the project, so this was very important. And finally they voted, and we had like the high majority of votes saying yes to this innovative project.
And how was it in terms of the willingness of the private? Sometimes the public could be, especially if you're referring to something that is rural, and then perhaps there are municipalities involved, and then the public aspect is more somehow forced given their role to be involved somehow. But then how was the private, the response, or how has it been in general in the project or in other projects, the response of the private sector?
One of the conditions for identifying the project, where we're going to locate the project, was the compromise, the willingness of the privates for doing the project, because of the need of sustaining the project after it was implemented.
Right.
So they were very, very willing from the beginning. I would say that the private sectors were more willing than the authorities and the public sectors, because they are living with the water stress and the water scarcity, and they saw the benefits, the potential future benefits for them in terms of development. So I would say they were the most willing. The authorities were more skeptic. And they had been denied before to do this initiative. They had the idea of doing it, but they were denied by the Ministry of Health. So I would say that the private were very willing, and that's something very important, because we see until today that the work is being done and it's being operated still.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And how important is the role of academia and research, do you think, in your experience?
Well, perhaps I can start. Well, it's perhaps a narrow or a very close recommendation from my side, since I'm currently in this side of the road. I would say that in that case, it's our role to provide information and to provide evidence about what is also needed. So it's also, I would say, in many cases, even though science and academia has is very broad, there is one part that also needs to be connected. And even though some of them are on the edge of knowledge and advancing on that, which is very important, also some others need to bridge. And in this case, that's where I see the role of, for instance, transdisciplinary research, and trying to bring many perspectives together and build in, so not expanding, but basically building up and based on the different disciplines and all the knowledge generated there. But then also what is required from us. I don't know, Enrique, what would you say that is, where can we support best?
I mean, in Latin America and in Chile, we're very traditional in the way we work and the way we develop. It's a very traditional view, and the innovation is very difficult to carry on. So, I mean, where we are not very innovative, and we always look at the risks, and therefore we deny projects, or we put these barriers on the development of these projects. We need the role of academia and research to provide the data and make the projects robust, to show that they are robust, that they are serious, that they are secure, and that they are safe. So I think the data is very important to locate the projects in this terms, we need a water scarce area, because otherwise we will prefer the water from the well or the water from the river to use, and not a wastewater, for instance. So we need good data and research in terms of where to locate, how to, then with the community, we can design the project in order to have their compromise and their willingness to develop the project. And after we also for the authorities, what I told, and after also to take indicators like you are working on, Andrea. I really appreciate this, because these kind of indicators provides the opportunity to maybe replicate and show the benefit of this kind of projects, to replicate and for having influence on public policies. So I think we need that. I think the way of moving forward in Chile is to have these kind of solutions, like successful pilots, to after that start the replication. So the role of academia is very critical. And even in our case, even we have been also the kind of the motor of these kind of projects, and to get together the different actors so they can being performed. And this is in a lack of policies, in a lack of a public development model in these kind of new solutions. So I think that in undeveloped countries or countries under development, the role of academia and research is very, very important.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for this interesting discussion. And I would ask a quick question before we move to the audience questions, and hopefully we can briefly answer all of them. And based on your the challenges, you listed some, and you encountered during your experience and work. What would you consider the most significant challenge, and yeah, would you like to highlight it?
Andrea, I don't know. I think everything has been said. I think we have put it on the table, the main issues, no? The data, the good information to locate the projects, a good governance to move forward with the project together with authorities and the decision making, and also the work in the design of the project itself together with the community. So I think those are the main aspects that, and after that comes the policy to replicate. This is the space maybe where we are now, willing to replicate this successful case.
Yes, from my side, I think I can identify many challenges, and I can also relate to what I've heard, and also what brings us to this colloquium, also the topic of the whole series of sessions, which is this cooperation for water management. I've also attended some other sessions and also in other conferences, and I think we all tend to agree that we need to collaborate, and that's I think we are agreeing on that. The challenge is now how. And I think that's what we're facing, and that's a big issue. At least it's like the first step is accepting it, and I think we did that. We recognized, and I've seen that in many cases the conclusion is always collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. And in that regard, well, I'm not a social scientist, but I can see that also considering that my research is involved in decision making, and that you need information to decide, probably also to decide on how to collaborate and how to reach solutions together. I see that information is key. And therefore, I again see the challenge of data availability and this transparent communication as the main challenge.
Okay, thank you. Then starting with the questions from the audience. From Makar, we have California just launched the water futures market. It's about the water pricing and for customers And would you think that the increasing of the water pricing would contribute to improving the awareness of water scarcity for the final consumers, especially industries, and maybe legislations to obligate them for treatment and reuse?
Well,
Okay,
Ulrike,
so
please go ahead.
this has come to us as well, and we have been discussing a lot about what happened in California, so it's a very good question. It's important to say that Chile is a very special case around the world where we have a private market already. I mean, we have and even we gave the water rights for eternity and for free. So we have a current water market occurring in Chile. So it's not very different of what happened now in California. The problem is, and the difference between United States and Chile is that in the United States, you have a good regulation of the water priorities and the water use, the human consumption, the conservation of the ecosystems, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have this water market to move water rights and for the productive sectors. However, in Chile, we don't have the prioritization of the water use for human consumption and ecosystems. So we are having rural communities without water. I showed one figure there when I had the cough, with water trucks providing and distributing water, and this is going up. So we don't have the prioritization of the water use, and I think we need that first, and after that we can think about what we do with the water rights. But there is a big opportunity now. We are running for a new constitution in Chile, so I think it's going to change a lot of things there in terms of water due to the water crisis that we currently have. So that's what I can say about what happened in California.
From my side, well, I'm also not an expert on that topic, and it's also very recent, so I haven't gotten the chance to embed myself in all the literature and all perhaps the background that could help me provide a better answer. However, I do take what Ulrike just said, which is also that, and relating it also to other topics that I've read and heard from other colleagues about, in the end, providing this or what was or including water in terms of future markets, or even adding a value of water is something that is being discussed or has been discussed for several years now. So what is the value of water, ranging from cultural aspects all the way to economic aspects and financial aspects. And perhaps this is a way of basically translating it into the language that basically rules all of our society, which is also the finances, and which was also something that made aware in terms of, for instance, this initiative or this very idea of the virtual water. So what is the value behind, or what is the, so if I eat an avocado here, what is the virtual and the water footprint that it brings, and there's a virtual water associated to it. So I think I understand the idea of translating it, and perhaps it even raises awareness in terms of, now it's costing me something, but I think it's different than other resources. So we're not just talking about oil here, we're talking something that Ulrike referred before, which is which relates to the prioritizations. That's a complicated word for me, because we're talking about a resource that is also a human right. So it's not as any other resource, and therefore I think it should be handled carefully.
All right, yeah, thank you. And moving to the next one, it's a little a broad question about do you think the wastewater reuse is economically viable option for developing countries like Ethiopia? or in general developing countries?
Ulrike, do you want to start on that? Because my economic analysis doesn't go so far in terms of experience.
Okay, I definitely think this is an opportunity because it gives the opportunity to use in an efficient way a water that is always going to exist. I mean, we as I said before, as long as we have human water consumption, we will have sewage water. So this is a secure water source that we should use definitely. It's much more cost effective than going for desalination, for instance. Of course, we can't compare the quality of water. However, we can do swaps. You know, we can reuse this water in agriculture, for instance, and the agriculture, the farmers can provide in back this water exchange water for human consumption. So I think it's definitely a good idea for countries that are under development. And if they have submarine pipes that discharge to the sea, we should definitely pump those water back to the water balance, and by treating it before, of course. And in the rural communities, if we look at the case study in Cerrillos de Tamaya, it has really given a profit and development, small development of this community. It's very important to mention that after we developed this project, the alfalfa was to feed animals, isn't it? So what happened with the water drought was that they had no grass, they had no alfalfa, so the animals died. And in this community, it was a coincidence that well, together with the community, we said, we're going to do alfalfa, but we didn't know that the animals were going to die the year after. But happily, this community had the alfalfa to provide for the animals, and they could survive this important water drought that most affected the animals. So I think definitely for communities and rural communities, it's really major benefits.
I can add also on that, perhaps like the 2 cents, as they say. It's also about, when we talk about water reuse, it's all, as in this case, it was about irrigation, but we can understand it as a fit for purpose. So it's not always about drinking water. It's not always about agriculture. Then you understand the local context. And in this case, for instance, if it was for irrigation, or if it's not for drinking water, but you supply the need of another source, as it would be irrigation, that then releases the pressure from the freshwater sources that then can be redirected, for instance, for potable use, then you're for sure improving a situation there.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, next question from Tamara. What does it mean that the vulnerability to water scarcity is far from desirable? What would be a recommendation that could give to FC to improve this? I don't know if you got what FC
Fundación
is.
Chile.
Okay.
Yes. Well, I don't have the indicators right now, but with the far from desirable, well, it was far, perhaps it's a big word in terms of it was only 60% of the maximum that could be achieved. So based on the indicators of vulnerability, which was, for instance, the structure, keeping the structure of the agricultural functions. If you were far away from that threshold, then you would have a lower level for that indicator, which meant that you were more vulnerable because you were not adapting as good as you could to the water scarcity, because you could not retain the structure or the function of the agriculture. In this case, what could be recommended is to I would have to see again the indicators to provide a more exact recommendation, but I would say that it again takes back to this situation of the limiting data, and it would be nice to have it how we could fulfill or address the whole situation, because we were talking about two different basins. And when I also talked to Dionisio, who is also the farmer that is reusing the water, most of the farmers in the locality of Cerrillos de Tamaya were channeling the water from the other basin. So in that case, it was challenging for us to define the level of vulnerability. However, a recommendation in that case could be well, it's also difficult to increase, because then it's the requirements of the agricultural activity there were so big that not necessarily the treated wastewater was able to fulfill all of it. So then in order, perhaps that's the maximum you can reduce the vulnerability, but however, we cannot see whether there was an improvement or not because we did not measure it before. However, given on the basic feedback that I got while getting the data, the perception was that there was a clear improvement. So I'm guessing that that was reducing the vulnerability towards water scarcity noticeably, although again, compared to the thresholds, which can lead us again to the definition of the thresholds themselves, which we also did not do together with the stakeholders, which could lead also to a different result.
Okay, thank you. Maybe another question from Tamara directly after this. It's directed to Ulrike. If Andrea gives you recommendations about indicators that would be crucial for the sustainable use of wastewater reuse measures in water scarce situations, would you, as Fundación Chile, be capable to take these up and make the collection of the data as well as the establishment of thresholds for these indicators a priority in the country?
I really didn't understand the question. Maybe you can summarize for me, Rakib, the idea.
I will try. I think she's asking if you had if you had the recommendations like about these indicators and which are crucial for sustainable use of wastewater. Would you be able to make the data collection as well as the establishment of thresholds a priority in the country? I mean, could you, maybe the question in general is how can it be applied in the country, or how can it be translated to the decision makers or within projects or so on?
Well, I mean, it's very important. It's really important not to just do the pilot, but to measure the impact of the project. So I think the first question we will have after seeing the successful pilot is, what are the indicators? So in order to make public policy, it's a must. So I definitely think that these indicators are very important, and that we had to look at, if we don't have now the information, what kind of information we can gather to fulfill the needs for having those indicators. Problem of water information in Chile is it's very dispersed. As you saw, we have many public organisms being involved in the water management, while they also are involved in different information platforms. So it's very dispersed. Many times we see that the information exists, but it's very difficult to access. But about the indicators, yes, they are very important for policy making.
Perhaps I can.
Andrea, would you like to add? Yeah?
Yes, I can. Perhaps I also understood Tamara's question perhaps also a bit differently, in terms of, in case I would say, okay, these are my results. However, for instance, for the short list that I had to do, I started with 86 indicators. However, I did not get the data. I will now try to do the analysis based on these 86 indicators, and then perhaps I show up with, you know what, this indicator is rather key, but we did not have the threshold. In that case, it would be difficult because, as you said, Ulrike, we probably need international standards or national standards that are not there. But in the case of data, whether we can, what would be your approach as Fundación Chile, or to encourage the gathering of such information? Probably with the project of escenarios hídricos, you're already tackling that, and perhaps that's what Tamara meant. Am I the one that's frozen, or?
No, I think you're alive. I don't know if Ulrike is still connected. I think not.
It's probably an internet lapsus, but it's
yeah.
okay.
I think we can go quickly to
Yes.
Christina, because I think we have a question on our Facebook from our Facebook viewers. Christina, would you like to address it?
Yeah, thanks for the very interesting dialogue. And we had a few viewers from Facebook, and there was a question. I think it's for you, Andrea. Why did you use AHP instead of ANP? Because the last one is more general, and you can analyze interactions between clusters and alternatives. And I think it's, I would just post it to everyone. I think it's related to analytical network process and analytical hierarchy process, what you used.
Yes, we used analytical hierarchy process. I must say that I'm not familiar with the analytical network process. I didn't see it among the alternatives that we were considering for the evaluation. Perhaps analytical network process relates to other group of methods. We were only analyzing the multi-criteria decision methods. Perhaps that's why we did not explore. So actually, I would not be able to say in which regard HAP is better than NAP. If it allows to see the interactions, what we used in this case HAP for was not to evaluate anything else other than the weighing of the weights of the indicators. And in that case, we did want to make it participatory. So rather than using something that provides us the interaction or the weight because of the system, how it behaves itself, because we also did not have historical data for all of the indicators, and engaging into a more automated result or statistical result, we went for a more participatory approach. I don't know if that answers the question. And I also wanted to reply to Fiseha Bekele's question from before about the water reuse in agriculture and successful examples and whether it can be used or not. There is a project currently and at UNU-FLORES, or there was a very successful project about the safe use of water in agriculture. It's called SUWA. You can have a look also on the outputs of that project. Perhaps that might give you a guide, or you can also contact our colleagues that were involved in that project. It's in the website. Perhaps that can give you also help.
All right, thank you. And due to that time, I think we might stop here. But if you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to direct them directly to the panelists. Unfortunately, Ulrike, I think she lost the connection right now, but we will share the email addresses in the chat. And I think the panelists will be happy to answer them. And yeah, finally, I would like to thank you all for attending. Thanks for the organizers, and thanks for our panelists. Thanks, Andrea. And yeah, Ulrike is back.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. And yeah, I was just thanking everyone for joining. And due to the time, we have to stop here. And if anyone has any further question, they can forward it to you or to Andrea. And yeah. Thanks, everyone. Next week, we will have the final session of the International Water Colloquium. The members from the Bonn Water Network will be there and presenting the Bonn Water Network and addressing the water as a cross-cutting element of the Sustainable Development Goals. So I hope everyone will be able to join next week as well. And thanks again. Have a good weekend. Bye bye.
You too. Thank you. Thank you, Ulrike, for participating as well. Thank you, Rajit and Christina, for moderating.
Thank you as
Thank
well.
you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Rajit, Andrea, Christina. Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.